Resuming debate, the honourable member from Flamborough, Glanbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me just say right up the top that I'll be splitting my time with my friend and the honourable member for Edmonton West, the home of the world-renowned Edmonton Mall.
Yes.
So we're here tonight to debate estimates and to debate the out-of-control inflationary spending by these Liberals that is driving up the cost of literally everything for all Canadians. And after 9 years, there's a couple things that we already know about these levels of obese government spending. One, the budget does not, in fact, balance itself. It is surprising, yes. And two, when you don't think about monetary policy, that has an impact on the fiscal and economic situation of the country, and it makes it even worse. And so in the recent NDP Liberal budget, we saw another $61 billion in inflationary spending piled on the backs of Canadians. And that was on top of the $20 billion in inflationary spending piled on in the fall economic statement. And that was on top of the billions piled on over the past 9 years. And the result is that Canadian taxpayers are now paying $58 billion in interest on the debt, which is more than the federal government sends to the provinces in health transfers. And so everyone knows that you can't run a household on a credit card forever. Well, neither can you run a government by maxing out the credit card year after year after year. So, Mr. Speaker, there are very real-world consequences to this insatiable appetite for spending. So first of all, it actually costs all of us. It's called taxes. And so if we think back to April of this year, common sense Conservatives called upon this Liberal NDP government to spike the hike, to not increase the carbon tax 23% on April 1st, on its way to quadrupling. We also know, according to a Fraser Institute study, that 9 out of 10 middle-class families are now paying more in income tax. So these tax increases are certainly the very last thing that Canadians need at a time that they're already facing a cost of living crisis. But of course, these Liberals, aided by their costly coalition partners in the NDP, need money because they've spent so much. And so they need to increase these taxes to fuel their addiction to spending. And because they can't prioritize spending and demand better results for the money the federal government spends, because they think money grows on trees, or you just print or borrow more, what happens is Canadians suffer. And Canadians now have to prioritize spending in their daily lives. And that means doing without. That means cutting corners on groceries. That means going to the food banks, as we've seen those numbers reach record-smashing levels, because their federal government can't rein in spending. Now, another real-world consequence of all of this spending is interest rates and mortgage rates. And we know from the Scotiabank report that 2% of the rate increase is attributable to overspending by this government. Other banks have agreed. This hurts Canadians renewing their mortgage. This also hurts Canadians who rent, who've seen record heights in rental prices across the country. It hurts those paying car loans, credit cards. So, Mr. Speaker, I hear on a daily basis from people in the suburban communities in my riding who live in fear of those mortgage renewals. These are young families, or in some cases, seniors that have downsized. They've moved out of the GTA for a slightly more affordable house a little further west. And those that have variable rate mortgages are telling me they're facing already increases of $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 per month. Can you even imagine that? The hole that would blow into your household budget. Those who are on fixed rate mortgages are beginning to feel that gut punch as well, and it's about to get even worse as more of those renewals come up. And that's all because these Liberals have a spending problem. So again, rising rents, credit card payments, mortgage payments, it's the last thing that Canadians can afford in the time of a cost of living crisis. So Mr. Speaker, there are other compounding consequences of this reckless spending and the taxes that result. How is it that Canada has the worst performing economy in the industrialized world? That is a consequence of this wildly out of control spending and all of the things that that creates. And so let me just cite some recent statistics that paint this picture. According to the Fraser Institute in May, Canada is on track for the worst decline in the standard of living in 40 years. That's after 9 years of this Prime Minister. Worse still, Canada has the worst growth in income per capita than at any time under any Prime Minister since the 1930s. In fact, while our friends to the south in the United States have seen their GDP per capita increase by 8% since 2019, Canada is pedaling backwards. We've seen a decline of 2%. We are the basement of the G7, the worst. Business investment in our economy is down. Productivity is down. In fact, quantified at 20 grand less per person than the United States. And I could go on because there's numerous recent figures. The worst performing economy in the G7 and the OECD, all because spending and taxes are chasing away private sector investment from our economy. Mr. Speaker, I think there's another point that we as parliamentarians should consider. All the money that's being spent is the tax money of Canadians. And it's very disrespectful to Canadians who work hard, who work very hard, who are smart people, good people, when their governments, like these Liberal governments, spend money beyond their means. That's the hard-earned tax dollars of Canadians that they're spending. Canadians work hard for that money, and they don't want to see it being wasted on Liberal-connected consultants like McKinsey, on Liberal-connected insiders, and scandal after scandal. So on top of these tax increases, the mortgage increases, groceries, home heating, all of the cost of living aspects that they're faced with, this is just another reason why hard work doesn't pay in Canada after 9 years of this Prime Minister. And all these obese government spending is making it impossible for Canadians to believe they can actually get ahead. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I hear most often that makes Canadians most upset is that this is a country where, like my omas and opas that came from the Netherlands after World War II, and they had, my opa muse had worked as part of the Dutch resistance to fight the Nazis, and they had nothing in their pockets. And they came to Canada seeking hope, opportunity, and freedom. And at that time, as in the history of Canada, up to 9 years ago, it didn't matter where you came from, it mattered where you were going. It didn't matter if you came here with nothing, it mattered that you could work hard, save up, buy a home, start a family, and succeed in Canada. But after 9 years with this Prime Minister, it's no longer possible to dream big. And people are quite upset about that. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't have to be this way in Canada. We have everything the world wants: LNG, critical minerals, nuclear expertise, manufacturing expertise, smart, good people. But this government has squandered those advantages with reckless spending, reckless taxes, and regulation that is driving private sector investment out of Canada to other countries. Mr. Speaker, the good news is hope is on the way. Only common sense Conservatives, under the leadership of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, have a plan to bring home the country that we know and love. We have all the advantages. We can succeed in Canada when the next common sense Conservative government rolls up our sleeves and gets to work. We're going to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. You got it. Mr. Speaker, that's why Conservatives will be voting against these estimates this evening. Canadians deserve much better. Now let's bring it home. Thank you.
Question, come on.
Questions and comments?
From St. Catharines.
Niagara Centre. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do want to speak about foreign investment, private investment that's come into our country. As many in the House know, the City of Port Colborne has just announced a $1.6 billion investment from a Japanese company, Asahi Kasei, that's going to be coming in and putting in place a big project. And with that, that just simply wouldn't have happened with a lot of people, an all-hands-on-deck approach from all levels of government, including the federal government. That included a lot of incentives that were contained within this budget. My question to the member is that with that support that the federal government has contained within this budget, is the member actually prepared to support a budget and then therefore support our community?
The honourable member from Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you to the honourable member from Niagara Centre for the question. You know, the OECD has reported that Canada will have the lowest private sector investment in our economy this decade and then as a result subsequent decades. And it's because of taxes, it's because of spending and regulation that is chasing away that investment. And while he points to one example where there was heavy government subsidies, you know, that doesn't preclude the macroeconomic picture that I spoke about. And you know, I had, Mr. Speaker, the opportunity to knock on doors in the honourable member's riding fairly recently, and he may want to try that sometime soon and hear from his constituents who without a doubt, the cost of living, the carbon tax, their mortgage increases, that is what I heard over and over again at the doors in Niagara Centre.
The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank my colleague for his intervention today. I would say that one of the things that I hear when I knock on the doors of the good people of Edmonton Strathcona, Edmonton Centre, across Alberta really, is that people are deeply worried that our healthcare system is becoming privatized by conservative premiers like Danielle Smith. And we know that the Conservatives have already said that they would privatize. In fact, what the health critic, I believe, has said he wants to be the last healthcare minister because he doesn't think the federal government has a role to play in that. Public health care is the #1 issue I am hearing about from my constituents. It is the #1 thing that people are worried about, whether they're seniors, whether they're university students, whoever it is. So I'm wondering what he says about not supporting a budget that could conceivably help to make our healthcare system stronger.
That's right.
The honourable member from Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you to my colleague from Edmonton Strathcona. I've had the opportunity to visit her riding, and there's many great places in there. On the subject of healthcare, you know, conservative governments over the years of the Harper government saw increases to healthcare spending during that tenure, and healthcare is important. I mean, I know this very personally and directly. My father had heart surgery 5 or 6 weeks ago and spent, there were some complications, spent a number of weeks in hospital recovering. My mom was a nurse in the hospital system in Hamilton for 50 years. So absolutely, we support healthcare, and what's important for healthcare is a strong economy that generates the revenue that we can actually afford to invest in healthcare.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Rimouski, Neige, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened to my colleague's speech, and he talked about how important it is to make the economy grow. You know, Mr. Mulroney, Brian Mulroney, increased capital gains in 1990 to 75%. In 2024, the Conservative Party is saying that it's not a good thing to do that. Mr. Mulroney at the time said that the goal was to stimulate the economy. So why is it that back then it was a good thing to increase the capital gains tax to 75%, and now it is a bad thing?
Thank you for the question. You know, I think that farmers, seniors, home builders, and small business people in Quebec would agree that this capital gains tax increase is job killing. And you know what happened 40 years ago. I mean, the honourable member is a young fellow. I'm not sure he was born quite yet in 1984. So that was a different time. I'm very proud that we are standing against this job-killing tax increase that is going to absolutely destroy investment and entrepreneurialism in this country.
I thank the honourable member from Flamborough-Glanbrook, and I also thank him for reminding me of some of us who do remember that time. And boy, these MPs are getting younger and younger every year.